Welcome to episode 0 of the Everyday Truths podcast. My name is Sherry, and I'm the creator of Everyday Truths. And today, on our very first podcast ever, I'm joined by my good friend Jen Jennings, and we're going to be talking about why this podcast is starting. And so I'm so excited you're here as we begin this journey together. Let's get into it. Hey, y'all, and welcome to episode 0. Of the Everyday Truths podcast. I'm joined by my very good friend, Jen Jennings, who has hopped in today to help me get this podcast started, to kind of share my heart about why I've decided to start this podcast and the ministry that I've been working on over the last 6 months. And so I'm so excited you're here with me. Hey, Jen, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here, especially for this inaugural episode 00. What an honor to just help launch this with you. I appreciate your friendship and love talking with you. You always just make me smarter. I have to really kind of intently listen to you because you talk a little bit fast, but I love the downloads that you have given me in our conversations and stuff. And I'm a better person. Because of you.
Thank you. I get so much from you too. I was afraid that you were about to say you make me feel smart because everything I say is so dumb that you'd feel better about it.
No. Not at all. No, yeah. I feel dumb. I feel dumb.
No, certainly not. We get to have great conversations, and Jen always brings me such significant perspective because we're just very different from one another. We think very different. And so it's always fun breaking things down together.
Yes, exactly. And so one of the things that I was thinking about this podcast, I've had a week to think about, not much thinking about it because I did have holidays and stuff like that. But one of the things that I just wanted to ask you right at the front is not only who you are, but why a podcast, and what has brought you to this point of wanting to do a podcast?
Yeah. And so my heart and mission has always been to take the teachings of Jesus and scripture and faith and make it accessible and applicable to our lives. Because often when we are on our faith journey, we go to church or we check different things out to grow in our faith. I think we think that we're doing it to get smarter.
Yeah.
And not, and I think there's so much more valuable in making it accessible and making it applicable. So making it real and making it relevant, where it's, our faith isn't something that happens on Sundays, but something that we can live out in the everyday. That's where everyday truths came from. It's these truths that are true today and every day. And just taking faith and making it simple. Now, simple and easy aren't the same thing, but let's make it simple so we can do something with it rather than just getting smarter with it. And so that's who I am, what my mission is, why a podcast. It's funny because about 6 months ago, I stepped out of full-time vocational ministry. It was my job to do ministry for 13 years. I worked for a church, and I stepped away just because it was time, because God was really pulling me in this direction to focus on creating things, whether it's on social. I'm writing a book right now. I have the podcast. I know. It's I'm actually working on too many projects at the same time, but hopefully here in a couple months, I'll have a cool ebook that people can download for free. And so I'm excited to be able to offer that resource because that's my heart, is to help people. But it's funny because as I was stepping away, I kept having people ask me, oh, well, when's the podcast starting? And I kid you not, when I say upwards of 30 people asked me this. Yeah. And I kept saying, I didn't say I was going to launch a podcast. That's not what I want to do, because I feel like great podcasters. Jen has an awesome podcast I've got to be on before. It's the Whatever is True podcast. It's awesome. You should check that out. But I always think about good podcasters being people who are really good at helping other people tell their story. And I think I can do that, but it's not who I am. So I thought podcasting isn't for me, but I kept getting asked. And after a while, I had to think to myself, all right, God, are you trying to tell me something here? And so I have some people in my life, Jen included, who I really tried to let them speak into my life in really significant ways. I feel like God's put those people in my life that I know to listen to them. We all need those people in our lives. And almost kind of have created, especially with this new ministry, a crew of people around me. And so I started asking folks, is this something I should do? And I thought that every single one of them were going to say no. Sherry, focus on writing, focus on what you're already doing. And so probably I asked the question selfishly to be talked out of it.
Yeah.
And almost to a person, they were like, you have to do this. You have to start a podcast. And so that's where I landed here, but kind of kicking and screaming, uncharted territories. But I'm so excited to see just what God has in this season for myself, for those of you who are going to listen and watch. I'm just so excited because I think God has big plans and I'm hoping not to get in the way.
Yeah. So you have this big vision. I think it's big and it's awesome and bold. Tell me a little bit about your faith journey, just kind of like a story or something that led you to hone in on making everyday truths, making everything accessible, making everything applicable. What in your story, maybe something personal, if you are comfortable sharing that or not, but something that just led you on your faith journey that kind of like contributed to this aha moment of like, oh my gosh, God is doing this thing with me right now.
Yeah. And so looking back, you know what's funny? I don't think I had ever told this story before. And I think recently I told you this story.
Okay.
And this is going to sound like such a weird story.
It's okay.
But I was a kid. I grew up on military bases. So we were at a BX, the store on all the bases. And there was somebody doing a vacuum demonstration.
Yeah.
So random. And he was trying to explain how the different things worked. And he was just fumbling all over the place. And I remember thinking like, no, man, explain it better. Do a better job. And so I went home and I was vacuuming, one of my chores, and it was funny because I started doing a vacuum demonstration for myself in front of
Sherry.
I know, I was probably 7. But like looking back now, I can see how I've always wanted to take things that seemed complicated and make them accessible where people could actually do it. That's what I've spent so much of my life doing, and especially in ministry. What do we do with this now? Like you have the info. What do you do with it? How do you live it out? Working for a church for years, I think some of the questions that I loved most were, what do I do with this? Or really vulnerable questions that people felt like they couldn't ask. Slowly over time developed a heart for making faith accessible and not seem like it was too big of a thing to be able to grab hold of.
Cool.
I think in my faith journey, I came to believe in Jesus. I was pretty young. I was probably 9 or 10. I remember we were moving, military moves, and I was pulling books off of the bookshelf to put them in a box. And I found a book. It was a Left Behind book. And I remember asking my mom, hey, Mom, what's this about? And she used that opportunity to like walk me through what it looked like to believe in Jesus.
Nice.
And that's where I came to believe in my mom. Yeah. When I was, I think, maybe 9.
Okay.
And I had been to church before. I knew like he sang the songs, but this is when it became real.
Yeah.
When there was fear. I'm just kidding. The Left Behind books are a little scary. She did not approach it from the perspective of fear. And so there is where my faith journey really began, beyond singing songs in Sunday school. Then as I got older into my teenage years, I think I saw my faith as knowledge to gain.
Okay.
I found myself making choices that were very different than what I was learning in scripture and things like that. I was involved with an awesome youth group, but it wasn't until I recognized that, faith was dead if I wasn't doing something with it. And so not like I wasn't saved, but like, does it matter if you're not going out and doing anything? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
And so it was when I realized that when I made that leap in my own faith journey, I took it from theoretical and I took it from knowledge to application. I think this natural curiosity that God has given me, I think it's one of the greatest gifts he's given me. This deep curiosity led me to trying to take these complex things, making them applicable and living them out, and then helping others to do the same.
And I think you do that so well. You've done it many times for me. Faith can sometimes feel out of reach or disconnected from the day to day. And so, Sherry, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges people face today when it comes to understanding or applying Jesus's knowledge?
And
What
so,
have you encountered maybe?
Yeah. And so I think I think a lot of people say you go to church and you hear different messages and often, they expand to all kinds of incredible things, teachings on Jesus' life or teaching from other things that in scripture. And it's like we take these little slivers, and a lot of times people aren't good. They're good at like the communicators and maybe folks you follow on social, pastors, is they'll like drop some truth, but they don't give this emphasis on what to do with it. I was really fortunate to be a part of a church that really focused on that application side, but to help people go and thrive in their faith. But I think very often that isn't the case. And so you go and you get these pieces and they're kind of all over the place, right? If you went to church for 6 months, unless you go to a church where they're like, we're going Genesis to Revelation in order. No, it's like you get these little tidbits all over the place. And so you get this little application here and maybe one over here. Or maybe
it's very disjointed.
Yeah. It can be very, very disjointed. And so then you're taking these little pieces a week at a time and you're like, okay, what does this look like this week? Maybe if you're trying to actively apply it, but what do you do with all these little pieces, all these kind of sand in the in the container, and of course you glean something from all of it, and if you choose to apply it, you have that too. But I think that there's kind of a more of a core to our faith that we can build and then build from. Man, the biggest barrier I think is that you can be living out your faith if you're not perfect.
Yeah.
And I think so often we look at, I don't know, spiritual giants, like those people, they're fanciful and we're like, okay, they're living out their faith, but like, shoot,
but what
like,
about
look at
me? Yeah.
Look at me. Like, what am I going to do with this? It's like every mistake is evidence that you're not capable.
I was actually going to like answer the question was like, my biggest barrier just personally is me. And my own innards and my inner narrative. I'm 44 years old. Whatever I've brought with me from my childhood, from my traumas, from all of that just is the biggest barrier, because I have to get past that and trust in the Lord. And that's a hard step. It's a really hard step.
I think helping people simplify faster.
Yeah.
And then build on top of that, uncomplicated. That's what this first season is going to be called, is uncomplicated. It's getting it down to the roots, so that it's not even that so you don't have to be confused. Anybody that tells you they perfectly understand scripture or God, I mean, man, that's a dangerous statement.
Yeah.
And dangerous as in like, it doesn't leave, you're not a learner then.
Yeah.
You're a knower at that point.
Something that I've had to get over is that everything is messy. I just have to be comfortable and embrace that. As much as I can, because I'm not a messy person. I'm a very orderly. I like organization. I like organizing other people. Like, it's just my favorite thing to do. That's how God created me to be. But I think what I'm realizing, like within the last probably 5 years, is embracing the messy. And things are going to be messy. It's you just take the next right thing or the next thing and you do the best you can with it. In that moment. I'm learning to embrace that in this season. And so that's just one of the things that I feel like is a big barrier for me. And so probably other people may feel that way. I don't know. But what could be another barrier besides going to church? Because that's already difficult. I've heard of so many people in my circles how they just didn't want to go to church. I don't want to go to church.
Yeah, after years. It's so funny you say it, because this is the first Christmas season I haven't worked at a church since my husband and I have been married.
Me too.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
We did.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm telling you, we didn't even have Christmas Eve traditions. What did we do? It was so funny. I kept looking at my watch. I'm like, shoot, what time is call time? Like, when am I supposed to be there? Like, wait, I don't have to rush through dinner with my family. I could not get it out of my head that I was supposed to not be at church. Anyhow, I think this extends. So you said other than church, I mean, my desire is that this podcast would be beneficial to those who won't go to church. I want this to go far beyond people who are like, oh, let me add this podcast on top of my Sunday stuff. I want this to go far beyond those who, shoot, even if you don't know what you believe, even if you are on the fence or you're kind of culturally Christian, so you're like, well, I want to do the right thing. I'd love to speak into that. I'm not a universalist. I'm not like all truth is your truth. But I think that living out our faith is something that happens obviously beyond the walls of a church. And so you would ask, what's the next biggest barrier? I think being a knower and not a learner is really, really, really a huge barrier. How often do we criticize something that we see and they're not doing that right away? And we double down into our own dogmatic beliefs. And we go, they're doing that wrong. Cool, go do it right. But are we really doing that? It reminds me of is when a celebrity makes like a major contribution, like they donated $1 bajillion to such and such. And everybody's response is like, well, they have that much money to donate. So who cares? And it's like, cool, man. Are you donating to those funds? We want to be critics.
Right.
And
So true. Yeah.
and we want to be knowers and we don't want to be learners. And that can be such a massive barrier because it's going to go back to the basics. You go, no, I'm way past the basics.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, Jesus could go so far beyond the basics. But when asked what the most important thing was, he said, love God and love people. He has gone back to the most basic.
Yeah.
And so I think that's such a critical.
Yeah, I totally
barrier.
resonate with how we as human beings complicate things so much. We forget to be like little children. You talk about your son Finley and how much he just he's talking back, not talking back, he's talking with you. He's so intelligent and so wise, even for being so young, but he approaches things like a little child because he is, and he has that perspective. And I think we've lost that.
Yeah.
So,
he came to me recently. My son, he's 9 years old, and he asks great questions. You can make a podcast. It's like questions from Finley. He asked me this great question recently. He goes, Mom, why does Jesus say so many weird things? Okay.
Perfect.
Being a knower and not a learner, you could very easily be like, don't say that. And like, no, what Jesus, that's confusing, buddy. Let's talk about it. Like, what do you think is confusing? And going on a journey side by side with somebody, you know what? Jesus does say weird things. I had never thought about it from that perspective. I think a massive marker of maturity is being able to learn from anything.
Yeah.
And learn from everything. I don't think a mark of maturity is knowing everything.
Right.
And so I think perhaps, even going back to the basics, as somebody who's believed in Jesus for forever, there's so much benefit to it if you can come to the understanding that you can learn from anything, right? If God can talk through a donkey, you know what? He can talk through a 9-year-old, and he can talk through the homeless person that you take the time to talk to. He can talk through your boss who is,
Maybe
the
jerk.
worst. We can listen and we can learn and from anything. And I think it's a major component when it comes to applying our faith in everyday life. It's seeing God everywhere because he is.
That's a perfect segue to how we are accountable and connect with people and how we kind of wrestle out our faith within community. And so what is kind of like your perspective on the role of community in shaping faith?
I think it's so critical because if you can learn from anything, you can learn from one another.
Yeah.
What popped in my head just now is I've played guitar most of my life. I started when I was a kid. And back then, if you're my age or older, there were no guitar lessons. There were no YouTube tutorials. You figured it out because you had a buddy who played the guitar and I remember watching TRL and like going and looking at the TV really close, hoping the music video had enough of like the guitar player's hand that I could get started, Nice. But you put yourself in community with others who are learning and growing on the same journey. And that's how you learned, right? And I think in our faith journey, it's really similar as we need to be shoulder to shoulder with people who are also learning. We all need the benefit of receiving thoughtful answers to real questions. That's why we need to be learning and growing side by side with one another to learn from each other's perspectives, to talk to somebody else who's been in a situation that we're going through that can help us understand, not those who are going to give us short, quick, easy answers. Like a bad counselor. We'll just stop doing that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do just need to stop it, but maybe that's a word for you today. But you have to surround yourself. You need people that are further on their journey. You need further people that maybe know more than you do, but you need to be side by side with people who are on this journey.
Yeah. Exactly. And so what do you hope to find in creating and starting this podcast? How would you foster that kind of connection through a podcast?
Yeah, that's really tough, right? Because it's like, I think we're in this age of like content creators where it's like, I made something, you watch it, that's the end of the relationship. I could say something simple like, drop your stuff in the comments. We're going to be in community, which you should, drop your stuff in the comments. Be like, Sherry, you're the worst. Why are you making a podcast? You should have asked me. But anyway, it's...
we like that, Jen. Keep her on.
Keep her on. Man. Who are the hands we keep seeing on the edge of the camera?
Right? That's Rick.
Hey, Rick. Hey. Who's doing an awesome job doing all of our sound stuff here. But like, let's tell that guy to talk. Sherry, be quiet. Anyway. But it's this is coming along side by side with one another and learning and growing together, because I like to pride myself on being okay saying I don't know.
Yeah.
And pride maybe is the right word, but I deeply desire to go on a journey with somebody. I don't want to give those simple answers. I want to go, wow, let's learn that together. And I hope that I'm able to create content and have guests who have a desire to be on a journey that will help others as well. We should see our journey in other people. So anyway, I don't know if I've even answered the question, but how I want to foster community is that we're doing this together.
Okay.
I'm not here to be an instruction manual. I'm here to be somebody on a faith journey that wants to be on your journey too.
Yeah.
Not like I want to be on, like I want to go on this journey together.
Yeah.
Because isn't that what we need?
Yes.
Is people shoulder to shoulder, striving daily to love God and to love people, or to figure it out. My favorite shirt says Jesus loves you, and I'm trying. I have it.
Yeah.
Whenever I wear it, places people always dig it. I don't wear it because I'm like,
get a lot of comments.
I really do. And I actually like wear it in public less. I don't know why.
You don't want to be out and about doing errands and stuff. And sometimes you just don't want to get stopped. But then occasionally you do because you get recognized or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah. It's, I swear when I've, worked for a church where I was in front of a lot of people and run into folks often in the community, I'm so deeply introverted. It's like, if I'm not in that mode, like if I'm in Target and somebody's like, hey, Sherry, it's like, I don't know how to human at that moment. Like, I'm like, Sherry, you are an adult. You know how to say words like pause, say hello, say, how are you? Like, it's like,
you know what? I have to do the exact same thing, but I have to remember to smile. Like I have to tell myself, Jen, are you smiling? Do you look like you're happy and you love life? Just make sure people know that, because I do. But what usually comes across is I do have the occasional RBF, So like it's one of those things where I have to just be conscious and tell myself, stop what you're doing because you're about to ruin it. So,
but to that shirt, it's like Jesus loves you and I'm trying. Like, man, let's try side by side together.
Oh, good.
Let's try. And when we fail, let's try again. And it's, I have little kids and teaching them to do stuff and they fall, they fail. They're like, never again. And I'm like, no, dude, you tried. Let's try again and let's do it together.
Nice. Yeah.
That's it.
So can you share a personal story or a time when a teaching of Jesus profoundly impacted your life?
Oh, goodness.
Can you think about that for a second and then...
Do I get Jeopardy music?
Do, 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 do. I don't want to do that. I don't want to make you uncomfortable.
There's like, no, never. No, I'm trying to think of a recent one that just really, really stood out to me where this deep curiosity took over. Goodness, should I be fired that I can't immediately think of an answer?
This is real life.
Oh, yeah.
This is an everyday truth. Sometimes you just got to stop and process.
Here, this has been so significant in my journey recently. I was thinking about, and I was learning, studying about when the woman who was caught in adultery was brought and put in front of Jesus. And there's so many cool things here. Let me think about what matters most here. We're in a weird political climate where we are just yelling everything at each other from far away in lots of things. Isn't that what we do? We criticize. And I remember reading that story recently and then getting, I'm a curious person. I love to understand the context. This woman is brought in front of Jesus and he pauses. How often do we not pause? And folks want to stone her for what she's done. She's committed adultery and the punishment should be that she's stoned. If you get into the technicalities of the law, what's really cool, I'll do this in like 2 seconds, is in Exodus when Moses goes up to the mountain and it's like the 10 Commandments. It talks about how that it was the finger of God that wrote the law onto the tablets. And we see Jesus get on the ground with his finger, like the finger of God. And he sits and he writes in the dust. And isn't that just an incredible and beautiful image of the Jesus humanity that he would go from the top of a mountain, from heaven, to the top of this mountain, to writing in the dirt. The law he created is being quoted at him. And so Jesus is in the dirt with the women, and around, there's a circle of people around who are calling for her to be stoned. The story, if you're not familiar, Jesus looks up and he says, if you're without sin, go ahead and throw the first stone. And they leave. They leave one at a time because they know they don't have legs to stand on if they have to be perfect to throw a stone. And I think so often I find myself with a stone in my hand. Like I'm ready, like,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
to criticize,
Yeah.
to undermine. And it makes me think like, man, do I have a stone in my hand or am I getting down in the dirt with somebody who's hurting? And I think it's really easy to pick up a stone. I mean, it's way cheaper than it is. I mean, I can get behind a keyboard.
Yeah.
That's all I have to do. And, or shoot, the person that I want to throw the stone at, they don't even have to be really there. How often am I turning and making a comment to someone about someone else or whatever that is? And it's like, am I not still picking up a stone? And so what's really stood out to me recently, am I getting in the dirt or am I picking up a stone? I don't think we're called to pick up a stone. And as I was more into that story, it's like, you know, so often we'll use this story and someone will say, yes, well, there was grace, but there was also truth because Jesus told her to go and sin no more. When you're somebody holding a stone, you know, you're like, well, but he also said, go and sin no more. And whatever the example is you're using, they're like, and they're sinning more. Right. And so, but here's the thing. If the woman had been drugged in front of Jesus the next day, would he have done the same thing over and over and over again? Would he have responded the same? I mean, I can't say with confidence like what he would have said to someone, but I can say with confidence that he would have never said, all right, boys, that's it.
Yeah.
She's done enough.
Yeah.
She is the worst.
Yeah.
Pick up your stones. Like warm up your shoulders. Like, let's go.
Because it's not in God's character.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And so are we getting in the sand?
Yeah.
Or are we picking up our stones?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is very powerful. Oh my gosh. So what can listeners expect when they tune in to your podcast?
Well, likely shenanigans, dumb jokes.
Perfect. I'll be tuning in every single time.
Yeah, dumb jokes. Now, I think that my desire, and shoot, man, if you're listening or anybody, if you ever hear me on there, not bringing it down to the ground, not bringing faith to where we can reach out and touch it and do something about it, what you won't hear is like this verse by verse breakdown kind of Bible study. Like this isn't a Bible study. This is not that we won't, you know, but this is let's take it and let's go. Yeah. Go and make disciples, right? Yes. It's like go, like it's.
So it sounds like you're going to be focused, conversational, engaging, connecting. It sounds like those things.
Thank you for, no, you answered the question better than I do. I hope every time what you're going to be able to leave with is this glimpse of how you can go and take your faith and live it out.
Perfect.
Take away an everyday truth, the truth that's true today and every day that you can go add to your life that day. I think I've shared this with you before, but the dream for me is that God would use me to say something, whatever it is. If it's on a 10-second TikTok, if it's on a, you know, a blog entry and, you know, read my blog. But it's on a blog entry or it's whatever. That's something that God would use me to do something and say something that would change someone's day. And in 10 years, this small change that permeated to their heart has altered and made them love those around them better and love God, whatever that looks like. But they have no idea who I am. Like that's the dream, is that I could just have that small, that God would use me to just have that small thing that just is what you need to hear that day. And I think that's what my hope is when you listen, is that God would just use my voice in a small way that day to help you. And I hope that that's what you hear when you jump on and you listen to this podcast.
Awesome. Well, perfectly said.
I'm not quite sure about that, but
no, it's perfectly said. I think for the listeners out there, Sherry, what she just expressed, I mean, throughout this entire episode, she oozed this, making, you know, everyday truths, knowing Jesus. Maybe some of it's complicated just theologically, but she makes it very accessible and applicable. It just oozes out of her. Like I could just ask her a very general question, like, what is sin? You know, and she can like pretty much pinpoint and be like this. And then I remember that from that point on. You know what I mean? Like it's just so
I love that question though,
easy.
Right?
Yeah. But I also think Sherry has a way of coming alongside you and helping you understand, like in layman's terms, right? Like, cause she could totally break out the dictionary and have so many fanciful words to express something, but it has been always very easy for me to understand. I need layman's terms and I want the quick down and dirty. And Sherry is very good at that. And so I appreciate you doing that for me personally. So I can just imagine, in your social media and what are you on actually?
My main
Yeah.
social platform is Instagram.
Okay.
I'm at _Sherry_Richard, and actually Jen Jennings is who created my handle.
It was a quick down and dirty. I just wanted to start it because I was like, Sherry, you got to do this. I've enjoyed seeing your heart for God's people, your heart for people. I am very excited about what you're going to do here. I am very excited about following along with you, also learning myself because I want to be a learner and not a knower also. And I think that, you have hounded that in us all, your friends and stuff. And so I just appreciate that. Yeah. What is last 10%? What do you want to share with the listeners? What are you thinking?
Right now, when you said, I'm so excited to learn alongside you, I thought, I'm so excited to learn on this podcast and getting other people's perspectives and having the opportunity to dig into topics. I want to learn too.
What are some topics that are coming up that you're excited about?
Man, okay, so this first season, I'm so excited about. It's going to run from here in January through March, and it's called Uncomplicated. And it's taking our faith and uncomplicating it so that we can live it out in our everyday lives, which is my heart always. And so I thought it was a great topic to start.
Awesome.
Is how do we uncomplicate faith so that we can live it out? We'll kick off next week with a good friend of mine talking about how God pursues us and how understanding that God pursues you is a great foundation for an uncomplicated faith.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for letting me be here.
Yeah.
Asking you questions and hanging out and all the things.
I love how you said, thanks for letting me be here. We're actually in Jen's podcast studio right now. She's awesome. And we came and recorded here. So thank you for letting me be here and just helping me share my heart for this podcast. You're awesome. And I will sucker you into many episodes in the future.
Yeah.
So
Sounds great. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
I'm so glad that you hopped on and you listened or you watched today as we begin this journey together. Special thanks to Jen, who was on the podcast today, and to my friend Nick Daniels, who created this awesome music you can hear going on in the background. You guys are the best. Next week, we're going to be jumping into the topic of uncomplicated faith. And we're going to kick that off by talking about how God pursues each and every one of us and how that is the foundation of uncomplicated faith. So you're not going to want to miss that. See you next week.